Thanks for joining us for another episode of Mid-American Gardener. I'm your host, Tanisha Spain, and joining me on the show today is one of our panelists who often joins us via Skype. And again, we're continuing that conversation about spring planting and transplanting. So, John, before we jump into our discussion and questions for today, introduce yourself, please, and tell us a little bit about where we can find you.
Okay, I'm John Bodensteiner. I'm a Vermain County Master Gardener. I live up by Bismarck on a little road called Shagrag, and we have about 3 acres that we try to have a variety of different things. I've got a lot of shade, so a lot of the plants that I have are shade plants, and so I also work at the Schlarman greenhouse, so I have that advantage as far as starting things, and so.
Okay, jack of all trades when it comes to gardening. So, all right, John, let's jump in with some of the things that you brought to share today. And again, we're talking about spring and transplanting. So, where would you like to start?
Okay, one of the things that, and we've talked about the seed starting and all that. I had a couple of follow-up questions. Somebody was wanting to know uh, what the seed starting mix was, and this is it. This is the one that you want to start your seeds in, and it's a Burpee product, and it's widely available. And it if I get, I'm going to hide my face here behind it, but this is very important in that it's a soilless mix, and it's very, very good as far as starting your seed. Don't use a regular soil for sure, and I prefer not to use potting mix. I do have another product here that's by basically the same company, that's potting mix. I prefer not to use that. It just doesn't drain as well. It holds a little bit more moisture, and I tend to get a little bit more damping off if I use this. Once I have the seed started, I'll transplant into this, or I'll use another potting mix. But you do want to use some potting mix as far as once you transplant. Now, once you plant your seeds into that seed starting, I do like to not cover them with the potting mix, but I had a question about what to cover it with, and this is vermiculite, and this is what I first lay out my seed starting, and then I'll put the seeds. I'll moisten it, and again, when I moisten that, I'll use a spray bottle so that I'm not washing the all the seed starting mix, and I'll just mist the top until it, and I pre-moisten the seed starting mix also, but then I'll give it a final spritz, and this is just a mist, and then I'll put the seed down, and then depending on whether the seed packet says use a 1/4 inch, use a 1/8 inch, do not cover. Well, if it's do not cover, then I don't. I just put a very, very little bit of this. The sun will get through, the light will get through this. If you put a very light, things like oh, a milkweed that says not to cover, but most of the time it says to cover with 1/8 of an inch or a 1/4 inch, and this is what I cover. And I found that this prevents that fungal disease called damping off. And so this is one of those that I really do like to use.
So, John,
There
I've
are other
noticed when
companies.
I start my seeds in trays, you get everything ready, then you put the top on, and then like you were talking about, a few days later you come over and there's this nice layer of mold on the top. So does the
Yeah,
vermiculite help with that?
correct. It helps the drainage. What that would indicate to me is that you might have it just a little bit too moist.
Okay.
You want it damp, but not to the point where there's water sitting on there. And if you have that little cover, that clear cover, uh, you may want to take that off every so often and just let it air out the top, dry off just a little bit, not to the point where it's days or for hours, but just so that it dries off, and that will keep that mold and mildew from forming on that. But the vermiculite really does promote the drainage, and I found that I don't have any of that. Now, once you get those seeds started, one of the things that a lot of people forget to do, and I usually will use seed. This is I use reconstitute or reuse Venetian blinds. I cut those up, or some some other piece of plastic, and I write and make sure that you use uh, a permanent ink. Don't use a wash off, because as soon as you water that, I've had some of the people wash all their work and they can't tell one tomato from another or one pepper from another. So make sure that you use a permanent ink and label everything as you're planting it. Don't go back and all of a sudden drop your seed packets and forget which way that it was. As before, I actually, what I like to do is before I put the seeds, I'll get the label, put it in the row that I started, lay the seeds, and then put the vermiculite over that, and then give it a after I put the vermiculite on, I'll give it another just light mist,
Okay.
and then go on to the next row.
We
So
have a
it's very
couple of
important.
other panelists who swear by pencil. They say pencil holds really well as
Oh,
well. And
the wax
then,
pencil.
yes, and then some who put tape over the outside of the label just to keep the marker or the pencil or whatever from not fading over the summer. So a couple
And
other tips in there.
if you've got a real sunny area, if you don't, some of the ink tend to bleach out or
Hmm.
just get very very thin. But
So
I did
once we've
bring
got
a
our
plant.
seeds, yeah, I was going to say, once you've got your seeds and hopefully everything went well and you've got your seedlings, now we're moving into transplanting. And so now what do you got for us?
Okay, this is one of this is a a couple of plants that I brought: some basil, some cardoon, and this is a tomato plant. So I want to especially stress on the tomato plant. When you're transplanting, what you want to do is um, get the cotyledons, and that's these two leaves here. You don't want to transplant until you have true leaves. True leaves are the ones that actually identify the plant. If you look at this little um, um,
Hmm.
basil plant down there, the cotyledons look almost exactly the same as the tomato plant. So those are going to be kind of hard to tell what you've got, but you want to wait for transplanting until you have your first set or even two sets of true leaves. And that's basically, you can see my tomato has got its first
Hmm.
set of true leaves.
Right there
And
on
so
the
I'm going
top
to wait.
there. Uh-huh.
Right. I'm going to wait until those form up a little bit more. This is still a little bit early to transplant. The root structure is not quite where I want it to be. I know just by looking at the true leaves that it's not quite where I want it to be. And then once I am ready, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick it up by the cotyledon like this.
Hmm.
I'm not going to touch that stem. If you touch that stem, I can almost guarantee that you're going to crush it, and especially on tomatoes, where all those little hairs that are on there are going to form roots. You're going to damage them, and that stem is so fragile that no matter how tender you touch that stem, you're probably going to do some damage.
Is that
So
a good rule
use
of thumb for all transplants, the
I
cotyledons
would
or the
say
true
yes.
leaves?
Use the cotyledons, and you can even wait and do the true leaves. But I prefer, because the cotyledons are going to dry off and die anyway.
Hmm.
So you really don't need those after the plant is established. Those cotyledons are basically just to get the plant started, get a little bit of chlorophyll growing, and you can see that on this cardoon, the cotyledons are very, very big. So I'll have no problem picking that up. And you can see these are the true leaves right here, this little thing right here. And they're going to be a completely different shape than these. These little leaves will eventually grow up to be 6 feet long.
Wow.
And the unfortunate part with cardoon is the deer just love them.
So you'll be sharing those this summer.
We have them out at the Kennecott uh, herb garden,
Hmm.
and we have to actually put a metal fence
Wow.
around them to protect them, because even when they're big, they will come. If you take that fence off, the next day you come, and I think the whole herd has come and has removed it. So, uh, but again, be patient. And I know we're going to have a couple of questions as far as when to plant, things like that. We've
Yes.
kind of gone over that. Prepare your garden right now. Now is a good time. Maybe not today, being it's raining and kind of miserable, cold, but plan your garden. Uh, you know, take a picture of it, draw it out,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and where you're going to put the tomatoes here. You're going to put the peppers here. Uh, and
Okay, let's
so,
go to some of those Facebook questions that you mentioned. So
okay,
I put out a request. I asked people if they had started their seeds yet and kind of where they are with their planting. And so we have a lot of questions, John. So I hope you're ready. Marge Heine wants to know where she should put some strawberries. She wants to create a new strawberry bed and wants to know the best varieties for northern Illinois. So what are your thoughts there?
okay. To me, I would get something that is June bearing. Now, I know that when you put out the question, somebody had said that they didn't like Gurney. Have found that I have had good luck with Gurney. So I would say, depending on the type of gardener you are, um, uh, they will. Gurney has one that's called a Whopper, and that's a June bear. Now they also have a Everbearer, and what I found that the Everbearers have you get two crops. The crop in the fall is so small, and it the plant saves its energy for that, I think, and so that the spring crop is so much smaller, and so that the and I've talked to even a couple of the strawberry growers, and they find that the June bears are by far the way to go.
Okay. All
Uh,
right.
uh, the Whopper, the Early Glow, Keepsake, those are June bears. Jewel is another one that I've had good reports on. So there are other sources you can go to your garden centers. A lot of times you'll get live plants, and depending on, I would again make sure that they are June bearing, not ever bearing. And I think there are 25 plants in a little clump, and get them out. And you want to make sure, one of the things that people do is either plant them too deep or not deep enough. You want to have it so that crown is not buried, but you want it right at the ground level.
Right at the level. Okay.
And,
All right.
and
We're going
then
to go to, oh, sorry, John, go ahead.
you may want to just protect it with a little straw, especially early on, so that it doesn't, it's going to be very tender when you get them out there.
Okay. All right, we're going to go to Linda Brummer Welsh's question. She wants to know when it is safe to remove leaf mulch from crocus and other early spring plantings like hellebores, and they also live in northern Illinois. What's your take there?
Okay, I just took mine off. I sent a couple pictures in. I sent a before and then an after, and mine actually right now are are I should have taken it off a little bit earlier, I believe, because they are pretty yellow. They are about 6 to 8 inches tall, and the new growth, and there are flower buds on there. And so I probably should have done it already. I would say northern Illinois now would be a good time to start to do that. If you are going to have a night where you're going to have below 15 degrees, maybe even 20 degrees at night, I would say 15 would be there. The hellebores are really, really hardy. Um, and the crocuses are even more hardy. I don't even cover my crocuses. I just let them come up. I've got some blooming already.
Oh, wow.
So I've got a real pretty white one, a yellow one, and a purple one that are already um, um, blooming, and I don't cover those at all. They're the first things that come up. And then the Lenten rose, which is the hellebore, that's another name for it. We started Lent on Wednesday, and so though or last Wednesday, and so that's where they get their name, is during Lent is when they start to bloom. And there's all kinds of varieties now that are double bloomers. They've got some with real pretty purple, dark purple, some that are,
Mm-hmm.
most of them are a lighter white or off green, but they will last for months.
Okay.
And I sent a couple pictures. When I clean mine off, you're going to notice underneath, if they're an established plant,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to notice hundreds and hundreds of babies underneath. and be very careful with those. Now, that would be if you have a bunch of those and you're wanting to save those, I would probably suggest that once they get just a little bit size, that you transplant those into pots and protect them until uh, uh, I would say mid-May, and then put them back out where you want. They're going to
Okay.
be too thick where they come up, and so you'll want to thin them. I wouldn't thin them now. I would wait and let the the strongest one survive, and and then go from there.
Okay. We've got a question from Jane Eccles. She wants to know when the best time to plant tomato and green pepper plants are, and then goes on to say last year they waited till about mid-May, and she wanted to know if that was perhaps a little bit too late. Said they did have a good crop, but wondered if that was just a bit late. So when would you start your tomato and pepper plants?
So if she's talking tomato plant indoors, I would say mid-March is when you want to start the seed. Now, as far as planting outside, I kind of confused on that question, whether she meant outside. I would not plant mine before May 15th. I really like uh, tomatoes and peppers to be planted June 1st or the last week in May to first week in June, somewhere in there. If the ground is not 70 degrees, they are going to be stunted, and then they are so vulnerable. Last year we had a late freeze. I know a lot of people had their tomatoes out, and a lot of people were going back and buying new tomato plants because they froze. And peppers are the same way. Those are tropical plants, and so. But right now, as far as seeds, I would get them started now, this week, next week, and that gives you about 8 weeks to get them to the size. And once they are up, I would put a little bit of a fan on the plant, just not to the point where you're going to blow them away. It's going to take a little bit more watering, but you're going to notice that the stalks on, if you do an experiment, put some with a fan and one without. The ones with the fan are going to have twice the size
Yes.
trunk as those that don't. And then if you take them out, make sure that you harden them off. Like she was saying, May 15th, she could have taken them out in the trays that May 7th to the May 20th and put them out there during the day
Mm-hmm.
and let them get used to that, start in the shade, then put them in a little bit of sun, then put them in full sun, bring them in at night so that what you call harden them off, especially with tomatoes and peppers, and then put them out and they should be okay. Plant them. I would take all of those. You're going to have probably 2 or 3 sets of leaves. I would take all of them off except for the very top and plant them as deep as you can. And
Mm-hmm.
because all those little hairs that are on that trunk are going to become roots. Some
Okay.
people I've even seen where they get real long tomatoes that are maybe 8, 10 inches. They'll lay them on their side and then curve them up
Yes.
so that just the top portion and all that trunk is going to turn to leaves, and especially during the hot, dry periods of summer. The last thing you want is the tomatoes not to have moisture because once they start to fruit, if they don't get calcium every single day, you're going to end up with blossom end rot.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Stephen Casper wants to know about zinnia seeds, starting them indoors, and he is in the Chicago area. What do you think about that?
Uh, you can start them indoors, but they start so well outside. If you really want to get them, I would say 4 to 6 weeks prior to your last frost date. And I would not put them out. And again, these are as tender almost as tomatoes and peppers. If you are going to have a frost, you're going to be buying or starting new zinnias. Uh, and there are some really neat zinnias. Some of them are huge, some are tall, some are short. There's such a variety of zinnias anymore that it has really gotten to be a very popular plant. They bloom all summer. Once they start, they'll just keep blooming. If you want to save the seed, you can let one of the seed heads just go. Don't let too many because if you don't deadhead them, then the plant will stop producing as many flowers. If you keep them at the beginning of the season, I would not let those flowers go to seed. I would keep those as soon as they show that they're drying off. I would deadhead those. and that's going to promote more blossoms toward the end of the season.
Hmm.
Well before it frosts, you can let one or two of those flowers go if you really like one, and let it mature, and then save those seeds and then put them in a container. If you are going to do that, I've got put them in. This is just a little coffee thing, but to keep them dry, I like to use these silicone.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. See, this is what I love
they
about gardening, how everything you have at home can be reused in some way in the
right.
garden.
If you get a lead coat or you get something that needs to be dry, they'll give you one of these, and I just throw it in with
Just
my
pop it
seed,
right in there. Like that.
and it'll keep the seeds almost at a perfect humidity without, because if they get too, and before you do that, you want to make sure that the seeds are as dry as you can get them,
Hmm.
because this will draw some moisture. But if they're totally wet, they're still going to mold. But
Okay.
these are butter daisies that I'm going to be planting. I already got 200 planted, but I'm going to plant another 300.
Oh boy.
That's one of the most popular plants that I have. So
Christy Wells writes in, she's got her lettuce, tomatoes, peppers, and bok choy started. So she's got her spring planting ready. But her question is, when do I start seeds for fall greens? So she's thinking way
okay,
ahead.
right, and again, you'd want to look at the maturity depending on what the plant is. Um, August, September would probably be, the beginning of August. At the very latest, the 1st of September. But I would say the 1st of August, uh, depending on, again, like radishes, they mature pretty quickly. So she may want to wait until and what I probably would do is start some August 1st, plant some more August 15th, some more September 1st. And then you're going to be to the point where
You'll have that nice
you're going to be able
stagger.
to, you're going to be able to pick them on an everyday basis,
Hmm.
and as the babies mature, and again, watch how thick you plant them, because if you plant them too thick, it's really going to set them back.
Okay.
And
Okay. Last question, and this one got a lot of discussion, one that I wouldn't think it would have gotten a lot of discussion. Peggy Zabicki writes in, do radish seeds need to be started indoors, or can I just plant them directly into the ground? And there was a lot of discussion about radish, so people were definitely tuned in to find out about this. So do you grow radish? Do you start yours inside? Do you direct sow? What's the word there?
okay, I never transplant radishes.
Okay.
Direct sow. Now you can put them in a pot, but put them in a large pot. I've seen a lot of people that have like a patio only area. They can get like a 18-inch pot, and you can put quite a few radishes in there, and they will grow, and then they will mature there. Don't try to transplant radishes. Radishes do not like to be transplanted. Uh, they are a cool plant that likes cold weather. They actually taste better. They're not as spicy as hot when they are in a cooler weather, and that's why people plant them either early spring or so that they mature in the late fall, and you're going to be much happier. Um, a lot of people will uh, plant a pretty heavy crop and then go in and thin. Again, just like we were talking prior, if you plant them too thick, they will be delayed. But a lot of people will put them in, and the very first radishes that show any size at all, they'll be pulling those out and just eating them in the garden. And that's me, for instance. I go out there, I'll just brush them off and eat all the small ones. I'll try to find so that I can space them, and then the others I'll let grow to maturity. But there's nothing better than even the whole plant. You can just, when they're small like that, you can eat the whole plant.
Just eat the whole thing. It kind of
And
reminds me of carrots. When you say don't transplant them, they don't like it.
they do
Carrots
not
remind
like
me of,
carrots.
yeah, yeah, kind of fussy like that. Once they're
Any of your root crops really don't like to be transplanted.
interesting. Okay. Well, John, that's all the questions that I have. So thank you so much for joining us today. And we're going to have to touch base with you again when it's time to actually get out there and transplant so you can show us how to not snap our stems. Because what's the worst than waiting on your seed to sprout and grow and you get it all the way there and then you snap it on transplant day? So we'll have to
And
check back in.
yeah, and make sure you harden them off before you take them out, because I've seen a lot of people taking their tray out and it's a windy day and by the time they get to the garden, they're all snapped off, and
Yes,
they've
we
done
don't want
all
that.
that for naught. It's a lot of work, and it be even expensive if depending on some seeds. Some seeds I've bought some of my um, tomato seeds this year are costing almost $1 a piece. So
Wow, wow. So yeah, we don't want anyone left behind. No snapped stems this year. All right,
no,
John, thank
no,
you so much. Always a pleasure talking to you.
have a good one.
Thank you, and that is the show today. Thanks to our panelists who came on and shared, and thanks so much to you for watching. And if you've got any questions, do not hesitate to send those in to us. You can reach us by email at yourgarden@gmail.com. You can also search for us on Facebook. Just look for Mid-American Gardener and send us your question that way. That way we can get those questions answered by our panelists and help you be more successful out in the garden this year. That's our show for today. I'm your host, Tanisha Spain. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Good night.